What's up? Welcome to the booth. My name's Riley. It's a great pleasure to have you along for Standard for the first time at day 2 here at the Magic the Gathering World Championship. Paul Cheon's beside me. And I'll tell you what, we've got some big names, as you would expect. It's hard not to, really. Feature matches at the World Championship, always going to have some absolute titans of the game that we all love. And here they are, Gerry, Thompson, Seth, Manfield, Paul Cheon. What are we looking at with these guys?
We got Gerry Thompson on blue-black control, featuring the new card Search for Azcanta, which Josh Layton has been basically saying the card's broken. And I think anytime I've seen it in play, it's done a lot of broken things.
It's really put blue control back on the radar, Paul.
Absolutely.
And this is a great thing for the format, of course, but it's an old guard of Standard that he's going to be up against here.
Seth Manfield on 4-color energy. It's the traditional Teamer energy shell, splashing black for 2 copies of the Scarab God.
Well, let's see how things shake out here between these two powerful mages, and we're already off to a cracking start here with Rootbound Crag joined by an Ether Hub, so it doesn't look like Manfield's going to have too many issues with his mana here. And what's he got cooking? And
Seth Manfield testing with Brad Nelson, basically saying, yeah, game 1 is basically unwinnable. It's really hard. They have a lot of removal effects, but their sideboard plans, they're very confident in their sideboard plan, and they think that they are pretty big favorites after sideboard.
We saw this yesterday, the way that the Teamer energy deck, it pivots in order to contest on the stack rather than on the battlefield. And I'm sure this is the way that Manfield's going to do it. I caught up with Manfield and Muller as well, and they said they've got a secret weapon against Standard, against not just in this matchup, but in
pretty good secret weapon.
It's a pretty good secret weapon. Yeah, you're going to get a huge leg up on the format if you got Nelson in your corner. And I tell you what, Manfield's, I mean, both of these guys are going to have to dig deep. X and 4, they're on the precipice here, Paul.
Yeah, but Gerry Thompson did not have a fatal push here, so this Long Toss Cub is actually getting in for a fair amount of damage.
And this is the snowballing start we see from these energy decks, where they can get off to an absolute flyer on the back of cards like Long Toss Cub. They hit hard, they hit early. And Thompson already, you would have to say, I mean, perhaps on the back foot here.
Yeah, the biggest issue here is, we do see this Long Tusk Cup. There's a lot of, these creatures are all solid, but at the same time, they're playing like 8 to 10 removal spells in the main deck.
Yeah.
And in this specific matchup, game 1, those removal spells do not do a whole lot. I mean, Harness Lightning is okay, but cards like Magma Spray, for example,
a
Braid, not the best.
Yeah, they are absolute blank skis. And look at this. Here we go. This is the spice.
Yep.
Here we go. Let's open up that spice rack. And what do we got inside? It's time for a bit of a search for Azcanta. And Paul, I mean, let's talk about this card. It has really empowered. It's been a huge shot in the arm for the blue control decks.
Absolutely. It's another card advantage engine for the blue control decks. With the loss of the creature lands in Wandering Fumarole, the blue-black deck really needed another way to just kind of get inevitability, and this is your source. You have this card that basically lets you kind of filter out your draws in the early phases of the game. Once you get 7 cards, it flips, and then you just get this basically very difficult to deal with card advantage engine that just lets you slowly grind out your opponent and take over the game.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, it's not clocking your opponent like the Wandering Fumarole could once the board was stabilized, but I mean, you're just drawing pure gasoline.
Yeah, if you've stabilized with a flipped Search for Azcanta, it is so difficult to come back.
That expedition ends up being a successful one. To the spires far off in the distance, then yes, indeed, blue-black control certainly can very convincingly overtake a game. And the other thing we're seeing here, filtering the draw steps, and look at this, disallow.
Yeah. You know things are not going well for you when your opponent, with a bunch of mana, is choosing to put disallow into their graveyard. Gerry Thompson currently doesn't have an answer for the Long Tusk Cup still, so he might just be digging for something like a Vraska's Contempt. At the same time, Seth Manfield has missed his 4th land drop.
Interesting texture to this game already because of this Long Tusk Hub. Thompson is under the gun here. He is going to have to respond to it, but Manfield isn't hitting his straps in the way that he would want to. And I mean, when we see what these players are working with, what kind of tools they might have, it's going to give us more of an idea about how this matchup's going to pan out. Because again, it is about pressure backed up with interaction, not something the 4-color energy deck does very well in game 1 against control.
Yeah, this is going to put Gerry Thompson down to 6 life. And Seth does have the energy here. He can make the Long Tusk. He can turn the Long Tusk Cub into a 6/6. So Gerry does need to find an answer here to the Cub, and he's found a fatal push.
This is key here.
Yeah, and the thing is, you look at this, and it might look like Seth is favored because Gerry Thompson's at 6 life. But Gerry Thompson is going to flip that Search for Azcanta soon, and he found an answer to this Long Tusk Cub. So I think Gerry is actually looking very, very good in this game.
Yeah, he's slowly pulling ahead here, and this is something that I think, especially for new players, where they see the life totals as more or less a scoreboard, Paul,
Right.
it's sometimes confusing to consider the fact that, yeah, it's 6 life against an opponent here. How can, when your opponent's on 20, how can you be ahead? But, I mean, that is the way she goes right now, with Thompson firmly getting his snoot ahead of this game here.
And a heads-up play by Gerry Thompson here, opting to cast Fatal Push on the upkeep, putting a 6 card into his graveyard, then triggering the search for Azcanta, putting a creature, putting a card in your graveyard, the 7th card, which allows search for Azcanta to flip.
And as we look at what Manfield's working with here, as he finally finds his 4th land, I mean, look at that, a hand full of action, but a Braid and Harness Lightning, once again, they are blank arenas here. They're not doing much.
And at this point, you know, Gerry Thompson, he's got a counter magic in hand, and all Seth can do is just play a threat every single turn and hope one of them sticks.
So we talked about the fact that Thompson is favoured game 1, and we talked about the fact that 4-color energy does suffer the results of being in a poor matchup in pre-board games, and this is where it you know it sort of turns around here as we see.
Oh, and that is brutal.
Jeez.
Censor when your opponent is stuck on lands is huge. And Gerry, as you saw the power of Search for Azcanta there, it is now flipped. He was able to find another spell, Vraska's Contempt, while also being able to counter the Bristling Hydra. So as long as Gerry Thompson can just deal with a threat every turn and find additional threats every turn, it's going to be really difficult for Seth Manfield to come back from this.
And look at this, Chandra, knowing that Thompson has the Vraska's Contempt and the Chandra still being slammed here by Manfield. I mean, Gerry Thompson's not worried about a thing.
Yeah, he's just like, you know what? I have the answer in my hand. Either I'm going to find a counter spell here, or I'm just going to go ahead and let it resolve, take the 2 damage, and then cast the Vraska's Contempt. I think Gerry Thompson might have a Disallow in hand, but given that he has the removal effect, I think he'd rather just use the Vraska's Contempt, and he wants to use the counter magic to actually deal with a hexproof threat, like a Bristling Hydra. That's a far more difficult threat to deal with if it enters the battlefield.
Now, obviously, you know, this comes at a cost. Thompson is going to take 2 damage here, but one thing that's really key about this blue-black deck, especially when set against the old blue-red control deck, Paul, I think you know what I'm going to say, they have the opportunity to gain life.
You've got life gain, you have access to Vraska's Contempt. Some decks are also playing Essence Extraction as well. So yeah, and Vraska's Contempt, it might seem a little bit clunky, it's a very powerful card, but in conjunction with a card like Torrential Gearhulk, you know, you want kind of this flashy, expensive instance in your deck to kind of flash back with your Torrential Gearhulk.
Well, here's a flashy card indeed, the Scarab God. We saw the first copy go below decks thanks to the second activation of Azcanta there, but this guy does not muck around. Not here to make friends, here to take some names, and this is where Thompson pushes forward and seals the deal.
Right, this is the actual endgame win condition. I mean, Search for Azcanta is a card that kind of lets you take over the game, but you need a way to win. So, you know, Josh Utterlayton, when he was doing the deck tech, he was just like, yeah, we need a way to win. I'd rather play no win conditions, but Scarab God gives you that source of inevitability. This creature is very difficult to get rid of, and once you stabilize, this is the card that is ultimately your win condition.
Thompson able to pick his poison here, and he ends up going with Disallow to take care of the Glory Bringer. It doesn't even get to
and he
spread
gets
its
to
wings.
untap. We got more than 8 mana up with the Scarab God, and he's actually putting the Scarab God trigger on the stack so we can actually scry 1 and drain Seth Manfield for 1 as well.
So that Glory Bringer coming back as a 4/4. I mean, a 4/4 anyway, obviously, Paul, but coming back as a 4/4 zombie dragon right now.
And this actually puts Seth Manfield on a 2-turn clock as well, because he's now drained Seth Manfield down to 19, attacking for 9, and then the Scarab God will be able to get triggered again on the following turn. Also, he can, of course, eternalize as well.
I mean, Manfield's on what, like 1%? Less than that?
I'm going to go with 0%.
Exactly 0%?
Actual 0% here.
Okay, well, outside of some kind of meteor, like a Star of Extinction hitting the battlefield here, in a literal sense rather than a card-based sense.
Well, I mean, if he actually had the literal card Star of Extinction, maybe.
Yeah.
And if Gerry forgets to maybe cast a counterspell in his hand.
Okay, well, outside of something like a meteor, it looks like Gerry Thompson is going to wrap this one up here. Manfield is going to be very, very glad to be able to hit his sideboard. Now, this was a pretty standard sort of display of what blue-black controller is hoping to do. Stave off early pressure, removal, counterspells, whatever, draw into the late game, and the Scarab God wraps things up nicely.
Yeah, and that's the thing with the blue-black control deck too. It just wants to play a lot. It just wants to 1-for-1 you. You know, use Fatal Push, use Counter Magic, 1-for-1 you, 1-for-1 you. Then cast cards like Hieroglyphic Illumination, Torrential Gearhulk, which is effectively a 2-for-1, and of course Search for Azcanta, which, you know, we've seen it do some pretty nasty things over the course of this tournament.
Thompson's not mucking around here, brings back another beast from Manfield's graveyard here. And a Harness Lightning on the Scarab God is
gotta do what you gotta do.
A little more than a bounce spell against the might of this creature here. It's going to keep Manfield alive for another turn, you would think, but it's all over Red Rover, you would have to imagine here.
Right.
Says Manfield's needs some kind of a miracle. It's going to be his second Harness Lightning. I mean,
he's using Harness Lightnings to get rid of his own creatures.
They've been rotting away in his hand. It's very unfortunate for the American here on the right-hand side of your screen. 10th ranked player in the world. Of course, a former champion here, but it doesn't look like fortunes have favored him heading into this game against Thompson right now. And
this Bristling Hydra too. Gerry Thompson has a couple of options here. He can opt to make a 5/4 Bristling Hydra, which would put Seth Manfield on a 2-turn clock. If he has a counterspell to maybe back that up, he could opt to do that. But it looks like he just prefers just keeping the protection up for the Bristling Hydra here.
He doesn't have to do it. He doesn't have to do anything here, Thompson. Look at it. Look at his hand.
Look at his hand. It's got everything.
Card draw removal, counterspells.
Life gain.
Yep.
It's just,
Yep, Stone Cold Gasoline here.
Also known as
Gerry
the dream.
Thompson. It is the dream, absolutely. It's like LSV said yesterday, just like Richard Garfield intended.
I mean, Gerry Thompson could put his hand face down and just be like, pick a card. What do you want me to cast?
Pick a card,
any card. Any card.
I wouldn't
Okay,
mind
I can't play the Scarab God. Okay, well, maybe I'll put that one to the side. But pick any other card.
And easy game, easy life here with a Vraska's Contempt off the top, but it's just going to be Scatter to take things out. And that's enough. Manfield's seen enough. Oh, he packs him up, and we're going to go to game 2 here. A very, very convincing display of power from the blue-black control deck in the hands of Gerry Thompson. But, Paul, it only gets harder from here for Thompson.
Oh, definitely. Seth Manfield has something. I remember when I was talking to Brad Nelson, because they are on the same team, they're playing the same deck. He has something like a 7 or 8 card sideboard plan. All those bad removal spells that you saw, they all become very cheap counter spells.
Yeah.
So now, and he is also bringing in something like 2 or 3 Planeswalkers as well. So now the game becomes play out your threats, Rogue Refiner, Whirler Virtual, what have you, get those countered, then at some point drop a Planeswalker with Spell Pierce backup, with Negate backup, and once that Planeswalker sticks, that's kind of their endgame win condition.
And that's all we've got for game number 1 here. But of course, stick around everybody, because on the other side of this, game number 2 and maybe even 3 coming away between Thompson and Manfield. Don't go anywhere. We'll see you live from Boston at the World Championship back very, very soon.
Play Standard each week to win special Standard Showdown prize boosters. Ixalan Standard Showdown events are hosted by local stores each Saturday and Sunday. Find a location to play at magic.wizards.com/Standard Showdown.
And welcome back to live coverage of the World Championship here for Magic the Gathering. We're live out of Boston, Massachusetts. Riley Knight in the booth with Paul Cheon. But right now, Tim Willoughby's waiting on the floor with some results for us here.
Thanks there, Riley. We've had a few results coming through already in our feature match area. It's already game 3 for Javier Dominguez against Ken Yukihiro. Javier able to get the early jump on things in game 1 with his red deck, but in game 2, confiscation coup on Hazaret, enough to close things out, meaning that they are going to a game 3. Our middle 2 matches, well, they're both control decks of various stripes against Teamer Energy, and it looks like Control kind of winning the day thus far. Shoto Yasoka able to get down Nicol Bolas against Huey Jensen in order to be able to win his game 1, and Sam Black, well, search for his Canter plus removal, doing good work for him, meaning that Sam 1 game up as we go into our second games there. Back to you, Riley, in the booth.
Thanks so much for that, Tim. Got Paul Chi on alongside me here. And Paul, these guys hitting their sideboards, and this game, this matchup, heavily changing after these guys have had access to their sideboards.
Yeah, and as you saw, as you got the updates from Tim, game 1, heavily favored for the control decks. But after sideboard is where things get really interesting, because I'm taking a look at the blue-black control deck, and there's not too many cards you actually want to sideboard out. So, you know, you're not even necessarily upgrading. Sometimes you're trying to guess what they're bringing in. Sometimes you're side grading. You're making maybe minor adjustments, but that might actually be worse for you. Whereas when you take a look at what the 3 teamer decks or the 4-color energy decks are looking to do, they're taking out their Magma Sprays, they're taking out their Abrades, and they're bringing in Spell Pierces, Nissa, Chandra, Torch of Defiance, so many high impact cards, and that's what really kind of, I feel like, it gives these energy decks kind of the edge after sideboard.
It's going to be really important to note this as well, the way that the texture of the matchup changes here, because energy decks are so dominant on the battlefield. That's where they really excel in these creature-based matchups. So they really have to pivot post-board in order to contest things on the stack. The fact that they have access to a huge suite of counter magic, that's fantastic. We're going to check in with Gerry Thompson here, because he's had something to say about this matchup, this tournament. So let's check in with Gerry right now as these guys are shuffling up, getting ready.
The person who's had the most influence on my Magic career is probably Patrick Chapin. He kind of took me under his wing a long time ago, and a lot of the good things that have happened to me in Magic have been a result of him. In Ixalan Draft, I definitely want to be aggro. There aren't a lot of mana sinks, and I think you want to end the game as soon as possible. My favorite tribe on Ixalan is definitely the Pirates. They have like an old school kind of fairies feel to them, which I really like.
General thoughts there from Gerry Thompson on the format, but I can imagine we can guess what's going through his head right now, Paul Cheon. He is obviously wanting to double down on the early victory. He's going to have to contend with a suite of counter magic that no doubt Seth Manfield will be bringing to bear here. What are the percentages looking like right now?
I think one of the most important things that Gerry needs to look to do in this matchup is get down that early search for Azcanta, then hopefully just try to 1-for-1. Get those threats off the board, use your counter magic, and then once the search for Azcanta flips, there's not a lot the 4-color energy can do to actually interact with a flipped search for Azcanta.
Great start here for Manfield as his Servant of the Conduit goes uncontested into turn number 3, which means that we could see some Hydras bristling away in the feature match area right here, right now, if Manfield has this card to bring to bear here.
But Gerry has the ideal card here. He's got that Essence Scatter. And if you take a look at Gerry Thompson's list, I believe he is playing the full 4 copies.
Full 4 in the main here. And
of Essence Scatter in the main deck.
It's being deployed against a Servant of the Conduit. So Seth Manfield very cleverly playing around this Essence Scatter here.
Absolutely. If you can take a look at his hand, if he resolved that Servant of the Conduit, next turn he could have played a Bristling Hydra with Spell Pierce backup. That's what kind of his game plan is. Now he's looking for an untapped land to see if he can safely resolve that Bristling Hydra.
Doesn't find it. Instead, it's a copy of Harnessed Lightning, as you see.
So I wouldn't be surprised if Seth now runs out Deathgorge Scavenger to again try to get a counterspell out of Gerry's hand, because I think Bristling Hydra is one of the more important spells to resolve in the matchup.
Shooting from the hip, Paul Cheon calling the shots as he sees them, and he's absolutely right here. Spell Pierces, I mean, you know, you look at it, the difference between that and Negate, not hugely different on the face of things, but this is why Spell Pierce just pushes things over the top.
Yeah, the 1 mana is a huge game, especially when you're trying to resolve cards like Chandra through counter magic on turn 5, or even turn 4 if Servant of the Conduit does resolve.
Thompson cycling away a land here, but he's under some pressure.
Yeah, and Seth is not really concerned about kind of the next spell that Gerry can play. He could have left up Spell Pierce, but opting to go for the 2 points of damage instead here. I think he really wants to use that Spell Pierce to protect that Bristling Hydra if he draws an untapped land.
And it is indeed a forest, so this means that Manfield is going to be able to tango pretty hard into the red zone if he wants to get this Hydra onto the table. And I mean, right now, this deck that Thompson's brought to bear is just...
Here it is.
It's looking pretty bad, to be honest.
Yeah. One thing that Seth might have been a little bit concerned about is the fact that Gerry might have another copy of Essence Scatter. He's already cast one, but that does allow him to play around Spell Pierce. But if Gerry's counterspell is a disallow, for example, the Spell Pierce would do a lot of work here.
Thompson, he's got some things to think about here in the face of this bristling Hydra. He's got a nice full grip, and there's a bit of action hiding out in there, but a lot of lands as well.
Wow. All right. So Seth Manfield already had access to 3 energy. So a common play if that is employed when people cast Bristling Hydra, if you don't have 3 energy, is with the trigger on the stack, you try to use a removal spell on the Bristling Hydra, but Seth already had the protection.
Thanks to the Ether Hub and the Servant of the Conduit, yes indeed.
Okay, and before attacks, Gerry opts to use Vraska's Contempt on the Deathgorge Scavenger, but there's that Spell Pierce.
There's that Spell Pierce, Paul, and that's exactly what we're talking about here. A huge tempo play for Manfield. He's able to commit a threat to the board and answer the removal on the other side. It is threats backed up with interaction, and that is how things go. That's how you win games of Magic when you're playing 4-color energy. More updates from Tim Willoughby on the floor.
Thanks, Riley. We've had a couple of quick games going after sideboarding for this Teemo versus Control, and Sam Black able to win it out after sideboarding, going 2-0 against Brad Nelson. But for Shota Yasuoka, after sideboarding, things not going quite as smoothly. A couple of key negates in order to protect threats for William Jensen meant that he was able to power through the removal and counter magic of a slightly short on land Shota Yasuoka. That one's going to a game 3.
Thanks, Tim. And now we're back with Gerry Thompson playing a Scarab God, and Manfield's on this tempo, Tim.
Yeah, Seth is on the tempo game. This is a 2-turn clock here. And the thing is, Seth doesn't, typically when you play against control decks, you don't want to overextend because your opponent might play a sweeper. There aren't any great sweepers that Blue-Black Control can play. There is Bantu's Last Reckoning, but these players have access to each other's deck lists. Gerry Thompson is not playing any copy of those cards in his 75.
No, there's no hidden information when it comes to the technology these players have brought to this tournament, of course, trying to get everyone on that even footing, especially as it's such a small field here, Paul.
Yeah, so this is 10 damage that Seth Manfield. But he can actually just remove, he can remove the Scarab God here. Nice, with the Deathgorge Scavenger.
Check this out. That's this is an interaction that is very new to Standard here, because we see, we assume the Scarab God is coming back every time that encore, that curtain call, but Deathgorge Scavenger completely messes that up.
Right, definitely. That was a great heads-up play. Currently, Seth picks up the win.
Well, that's it. Oh, there's not more to say. There's not too much more to say about it here, Paul, because Seth Manfield, in very convincing fashion, just like we drew it up here, and it's great to be able to explore the texture of this matchup with all of this information we already have about it, because what the next step is here, I would say, for people around the world looking to bust this format open, we have all this data, we have all this information about how these matchups pans out. It's now on you around the world, wherever you are. Thanks for joining us, of course. It's on you to use this information to your benefit to take down your next tournament.
Yeah, absolutely. And again, I talked to Brad Nelson when he was because he was, I believe, the person who put a lot of time into kind of tuning, because he is the standard master after all. That is Seth Manfield's secret weapon. And yeah, he was basically saying, look, I could have made my matchup against Control better game 1 if I wanted to, but my main intention game 1 was to make sure that I was good in the mirror against Teamer, etc., and then just make sure I have a good plan against Control after sideboard. And you got to see what happened there.
And we've seen this. We've seen this with players all up and down the tables. I mean, Confiscation Coups, Essence Scatters in the main of these Teemo decks. They are looking to smash the mirror wide open, but in doing so, yeah, they leave themselves vulnerable for Control to sweep in, and that's why we have those sideboard plans that have come out. Now, these guys here, William Jensen and Shota Yasuoka, both of them Hall of Famers, both of them absolutely hard-hitting heavyweights of the Magic scene today. Both of them at 1 game win apiece here. And again, look at this. It's Control versus Energy. This is the matchup of the tournament. Yeah, Control versus Energy. We're going to be seeing a lot of this throughout the course of the tournament. And, I would say that the edge just goes to oftentimes the player on the plate. Now it's going to be harder for Huey to sneak in a threat through a counterspell. And so I believe that Shota now has a slight edge. But again, after sideboard, Teamer gets aboard, had all those removal spells for a bunch of counter magic. Now we're looking at Yasuoka's deck here, and it's quite significantly different from what Thompson was bringing to it. It is straight 3 colors. Yeah, it is straight 3 colors. He does have access to a couple of sweepers, so this is slightly different in the sense that you can't just look to play out a bunch of creatures and get 1-for-1, because Shota Yasuoka could play Hour of Devastation. He could play Bantu's Last Reckoning to just wipe the board. Yasuoka also rocking some new technology with 4 copies of Opt. This is a card that, again, has made some waves throughout Modern, and we've seen it here and there in Standard decks as well. But Yasuoka, he's not making around full 4 copies. Play.
Yeah, he's the only control player who has decided to play 4 copies of this card, and I think it's because it is a cheap cantrip effect that helps smooth out your draws, but on another point, it allows him to fill up his graveyard quicker to flip that Search for Azcanta.
That's a great point as well, because no one's going to be surprised to learn that Yasuoka is playing the Search for Azcanta, the full 3 copies in the main here. None of the sideboard. We do see Thompson with the 3-in-1 split, but as a legendary permanent, as a legendary land, sometimes it can be a little awkward.
Right, and he's also opted to actually cheat on lands a little bit because he's playing the 4 copies of Opt. Most control decks these days, especially Torrential Gearhulk decks, have been playing something like 26 to 27 lands. He's playing 24.
Only
24 lands with 4 Ops.
Yeah.
I guess Search for Azcanta becomes a land eventually, but the Opt does kind of help you find those lands.
Going to smooth them out, and Yasuoka's going to need that now because I think he's down to 6 here. Is that right? Looks
Yeah,
like he's taking a mulligan.
And he might be going to 5.
Oh, jeez. Yeah, this is tricky stuff here. I mean, the control deck needs all the cards it can pull together in order to win, and already with Jensen having access to the cards in his sideboard, I mean, Jensen's not mucking around in his sideboard either. 4 copies of Negate, 1 copy of Supreme Will, in addition to the Commit to Memory in the main deck. But Paul Cheon, what else are we looking at from the sideboard of the
He's
of the
also
American
got
here?
2 copies of Torrential Gearhulk. He becomes a Gearhulk control deck after sideboard as well, but he's got a little bit of the edge because he also has threats that he can play in the early phases of the game. So he can actually play kind of this aggro control shell where, yeah, you can maybe run that Long Tusk Cub early, and if they don't have the removal spell, if you get to just hold a bunch of counter magic to protect that Cub, that allows you to win the game. Whereas, you know, you take a look at these like Grixis or Blue-Black control decks, they don't really have a win condition unless, you know, you get to 5 or 6 mana.
Yasuoka here on 5 cards, and I tell you what, Paul, with the Scry at the top, Yasuoka that's about as good as they come.
Yeah, yeah. The card that Shota absolutely needs to have to come back here is a turn 2 Search for Azcanta. If he does, then that is... Oh, there it is.
Ding! There we go. Not a worry in the world here. Yasuoka also with a grip counter magic. He's got a Disallow. He's got an Essence Scatter. I mean, we don't talk about you know, 5-card hands ever being too powerful, but if there is a hand that can dig him out of this, the top of his library treats him kindly, and let's not forget, it's also Shota Yasuoka.
Right, of course. So he's really hoping for basically not Long Tusk Cub here, I think. A Servant of the Conduit, you know, it's a 2-2, but the Long Tusk Cub is the card that can kind of get a little bit out of hand given that Shota Yasuoka doesn't have a removal time. Oh, but he finds a Fatal Push.
Ripping like an absolute
and
fiend
he has an
here.
Essence Scatter for a turn 3 creature if William Hugh Jensen opts to play Virtuoso or Rogue Refiner, which he does have.
Immediately, look at this. So Yasuoka able to enact the game plan of his
needs a blue
control
source.
deck.
Needs an untapped blue source here.
Oh, he doesn't have
okay.
it.
So this is the window here. This is the window for William Hugh Jensen to try to resolve a threat, and he does.
And hot and fresh off the top of his library, Bristling Hydra. So that really spells trouble here for Yasuoka because it's a hexproof beater, and it's going to be... Oh, no,
Ooh.
okay. I'm just going to get a big
Gonti.
steaming bowl of my own words here and chomp them right up because here is the Lord of Luxury.
There were a lot of different options there. I saw a Bristling Hydra underneath and also a Torrential Gearhulk. I imagine he's likely going for the Bristling Hydra given that he's kind of stuck on lands here. Wow.
Okay, well, Jensen with all the answers here is with a Lord of Luxury coming across onto his side of the battlefield after a confiscation coup is going to wrap things up nicely. So Precious back onto Yasuoka here. He does still have the card from Gonti.
Right.
He's scrying, or not scrying, but he's digging through his library thanks to the Search for Azcanta. But, I mean, his back's against the wall here, Paul.
Yeah, and keep in mind, he does have that card. I think that was the Bristling Hydra, so he does have 3 energy. Huey is currently on 7 energy, so he can make a 6/5 Bristling Hydra, but Shota can make his into a 5-power creature, so Huey just needs to find 2 more energy, and he draws Rogue Refiner, so now he has 9 energy. So now he can freely attack that Bristling Hydra into Shota's Bristling Hydra, and he has the bigger Hydra.
This is the thing, these Hydras don't play great on defense. Like, they're never really...
You need to have a lot more energy than your opponent to actually make a profitable attack.
And right now, Jensen has a lot more energy, 6 of it, in fact. And as a result, Yasuoka is having the screws turned at him in a major way. And if that weren't enough, Jensen's hand is still absolutely stacked. Look at this. Supreme Will, Negate. We've got Torrential Gearhulk to wrap things up as well. He's got a handful of threats and interaction, and this is the strength of the energy deck.
Yeah, and that's the thing. He has managed to stick some threats, and now he's got a handful of counter magic to protect those threats. It's going to be super difficult for Shota to come back from this. I mean, he did draw Harness Lightning, which is pretty strong here because he did get some of that energy from casting his own Bristling Hydra. and he has the disallow. But William Huey Jensen, he has double counterspell backup here. Not to mention, there's also a backup plan. He's got a Gear Hulk in hand.
Yeah. He's got infinite counterspells. He's got plays for days, and he's just going to send them in. Look at
even
this.
Even with the Rogue Refiner.
Oh, not a worry in the world, Paul. Yasuoka certainly on the back foot, and William Jensen looking to continue this incredible uncontested run here at 10-0. He's paired down against someone with 4 losses. It's insanity here at the World Championship.
Well, when you have all the wins in the room, I guess you just start playing. He's like
just soaking them. You're going around and getting them off other people's plates. Give me that ham sandwich. I'm going to eat that myself, he says.
You should just have a little pin that just says, who's next?
Yeah, that's it. Yeah, people are going up to the pairings being like, please, not me, not me, not me, not me.
I mean, yeah, he's still got 4 more pro points to try to pick up here, right?
Oh, this is
every round. Every round is a pro point.
We're playing for keeps here. We're playing for keeps. We talked about this earlier on the broadcast, the fact that players aren't going to sit down. They're not going to shake the hand, the IDs, the concessions, whatever else. We're not going to see it as Bristling Hydra becomes a very big boy here.
All right, so Shota Yasuoka has a harnessed lightning here, which he's going to use on the Gonti to stay alive. But Huey's got to negate.
Yeah, this is going to
wrap things up nicely. But then Shota is going to disallow, and then Huey's going to Supremo for the win.
Look at that. Enough is enough here for William Jensen. 11-0, if you'll believe it. An incredible run continues from the American Master as he takes down Shota Yasuoka. What a scalp as well. I mean, this is the Japanese Hall of Famer, no slouch himself, Paul.
Absolutely. And I think Luis Scott Vargas mentioned earlier, he had dinner last night with PGO, and they were discussing sideboard plans for all the various decks in the field. I am certain that they talked about the control matchup and how you're supposed to sideboard there. It looks like he had a good plan.
Absolutely.
He was down a game,
Absolutely.
won games 2 and 3.
He has hit it. He's gone swinging for the fences here, and he's done very, very well for himself, Jensen. And of course, his is a career that we will be watching with great interest as we get towards the spikier end of this tournament. But I mean, he's locked up. He's locked up for top 4.
Oh, for sure. But the thing is, he's still playing. Every round is still a pro point.
Got to get those pro points.
Right. And this is the ideal start for Gerry. This is game 3, and he does have the turn 2 search for Escanta. So Seth Manfield plays the threat out here, but as long as Gerry has an answer and can just continue to curve out, I mean, I think this is one of the keys to the matchup.
Illumination hits the bin here, so does Thompson have the removal spell for the Long Tusk Cup? Looks like indeed he does, in the form of Essence Extraction, again buffering the life total of the blue-black deck. It's a nice little bit of upside, especially against Ramunap Red here.
Yeah, and Gerry opting to now cast a main phase. If it was game 1, he would wait. But given that it's post-board, Seth Manfield has access to all those counterspells, so he just needs to tap out on his turn whenever he can to play around that pesky Spell Pierce.
That's right, make hay while the sun shines, because of course Negate Spell Pierce is coming the way of Seth Manfield. Both of these boys, they are hustling hard at 6 and 4 again. They're wanting to join Huey Jensen on that pedestal later on.
Here we go, 3-drop. It's going to be good.
It's a Rogue Refiner.
Yeah, Brad Nelson said this was the heart and soul of his deck.
It absolutely
There's
is.
no more Tireless Tracker, because that is rotated. So now Rogue Refiner, you are the new MVP. You are the card advantage engine for the 3-mana slot.
Thompson continues to stock that graveyard here with 4 mana. What can he do to continue to influence this game?
Yeah, but Thompson's, you know, he's at a pretty comfortable life total. He got to resolve that Essence Extraction. He's got a grip full of counter magic. Actually, let's take a look and see what he's working with here. He's got Disallow, Illumination, another Search, and a Swamp. So he can counter any of Seth's threats. And he, for the time being, that Rogue Refiner isn't really too much of a big deal.
We'll see how Thompson wants to navigate these potentially choppy waters here.
So
Manfield.
this is actually the point oftentimes when you play kind of this mid-range versus control matchup. When you see a control player with 4 mana up, you know they're looking to cast Glimmer of Genius or Hieroglyphic Illumination. That is the point where you want to start jamming threats to make it awkward for them. Put them to the test. Make them cast their counter magic, meaning that they're stuck with this 4-mana card draw spell in their hand and they can't hit their land drops.
Yeah, that's a great point. I mean, the fact that, you know, when they're sort of putting aside a turn to continue to draw cards, get ahead on card advantage, whatever else. If you can make them inefficiently spend their mana on 2 mana, 3 mana counter spells, yeah, that can be a spanner in the works.
Yeah, it's really interesting here that Seth Manfield opted to play Servant of the Conduit here instead of Attune with Ether to try to. Oh, okay. So I was like, if he didn't have another green source, that would be a little bit weird. But it looks like he actually drew Sheltered Thicket for the turn.
So, Hieroglyphic Illumination is going to draw Gerry Thompson 2 more cards. Essence Scatter and a Swamp off the top for him. And while the pressure is beginning to build here for Thompson, he's still well and truly in this game.
Yeah, he's got 4 cards in his graveyard, and that was big.
Yeah,
you know,
really nice pickup here for Thompson.
Oftentimes you want to flip that Search for Escanta as quickly as possible. So you know, if you are the opponent and your opponent chooses to keep that card, it's going to be a nice one.
Oh yeah. So swamp the play now, and we may see this fatal push immediately pick off the servant here.
Yeah, I think this is actually a pretty good opportunity to use the fatal push. He could have also opted to maybe do it on Seth Manfield's upkeep, so that if Seth was interested in protecting it, or had a, if he had something like a negate to protect it, then he would kind of make him use his mana on his turn.
But now Manfield is going to be able to slam this Nissa Vital Force should he choose to. But I mean, that's risky into 4 open mana from a control deck.
Yeah, I think that's probably the last threat that you actually want to try to resolve. I imagine he's got another Rogue Refiner in hand, it looks like, so that's probably what he's going to be going with here, followed with another Servant of the Conduit, because we know Gerry Thompson, no sweepers in his 75.
So Manfield's looking to run Thompson out of answers before he commits something like Nissa to the board.
Right. That, or wait until you actually have some kind of counter magic to back it up.
Okay.
Nissa, for example, 6th land, Nissa plus Spell Pierce, maybe 7th land, Nissa plus Negate.
That's the way to get it done against control decks. You go bigger, you go harder, and you bring in the interaction that actually matters against them. I mean, Manfield is sitting on a Harness Lightning, which isn't a blank, but it's not doing the heavy lifting that it would do against many other creature decks.
Yeah, but I think Harness Lightning is still pretty important because Torrential Gearhulk is still incredibly strong against you. If you don't have any Harness Lightnings in your deck, then Gerry Thompson can freely play a Torrential Gearhulk and use it to just eat one of the creatures on the board when they attack.
Yeah, you're asking for trouble there if you're not coming with the tools you need to go toe-to-toe with a 5/6 here. Whirl of Virtuoso is a nice threat against the control decks. Enables them to go wide here. Thompson, he's pausing. He's having a think about it. Got a bit of a Frownsky on that dial here. But he's got the answers he needs.
Yeah, he's got a ton of Essence Getters, so he's actually looking pretty good right now, and he's going to flip that Search for Azcanta soon, so he's doing pretty well for himself.
Another Essence Scatter for the Servant of the Conduit as well. So Thompson, this is what we were talking about in terms of using mana efficiently. That was a great turn for Thompson.
Oh yeah, and he gets to flip the Search for Azcanta this turn. This is big. Gerry doesn't mind. Again, 1 for 1, 1 for 1, 1 for 1. I don't care if it's your 2 mana 2/2. The thing is, Servant of the Conduit is also pretty strong in this matchup because it lets you have a mana advantage over the control deck. You can try to play that Planeswalker with counterspell backup.
I want to ask you something about the Search for Azcanta here as we see it flip over to the other side. Now, obviously, the activated ability is the reason that people are playing the ability primarily.
Oh.
How important is it, however, that it gives it an extra mana? Let's get through this duress here, but Paul, that's something for you to think about.
That is huge.
Does it make a huge difference?
Absolutely. The fact that it taps for mana is a big reason why this card is powerful because, look, you can use the mana how you wish. The ability itself is quite strong. It might even be just a good card even if it didn't tap for mana, but the fact that you can and turbo out of, for example, Torrential Gearhulk potentially on turn 5, that is huge.
And we're going to see Thompson benefit further from the mana that this card has given him as we see Nissa Vital Force hit the bin thanks to that duress. And Thompson bringing in at least 1 copy of the 4 duresses he has in his board. And I like this against the way that Teamer is positioned.
I think that's a really good heads-up play. I know oftentimes you don't want to bring it, because sometimes when you think about bringing in duress in this match, you're like, oh, well they're beating me down with energy creatures. Why would I do that? But if you see their sideboard plan, and they're bringing in a bunch of Planeswalkers and a bunch of counterspells, you need some of that cheap interaction to nab that negate, nab that Planeswalker out of their hand.
And I mean, what we're seeing here is duress at its best. It is sniping a non-creature threat at the death just before it comes down, but generally, it just eats a negate out of their hand. And you know what? That's fine.
Yeah. The gamble here, though, is still you're playing against an energy deck. They have a lot of creatures still, right? Yeah. That moment when you play that duress, like turn 1, and they just have just Servant, 2 Bristling Hydras, and a Rogue Refiner, you're like, feels bad, man.
Yeah, absolutely. Pack them up and go home.
Right.
So, activation of the Sunken Ruin here.
Yeah, this Gerry firmly in the driver's seat, unless somehow this Rogue Refiner goes the distance.
A card that we sort of had on our radars heading into this tournament to contest these blue decks was Carnage Tyrant, and it just hasn't happened.
Yeah, I think a lot of people figured out that, you know, the blue decks actually do have answer to the card Carnage Tyrant in the form of Vizier of Many Faces. And that's a card that you've seen in a lot of these blue control deck sideboard. And if you noticed, there are 0 Carnage Tyrants in any of these energy decks. There are no Carnage Tyrants in sideboards because they've realized that, look, if I'm playing against a blue control deck, they're just going to bring in Vizier of Many Faces. This card single-handedly deals with 2 Carnage Tyrants.
Yeah.
So I actually wouldn't be surprised if the metagame shifts even further and you just don't see these Viziers anymore at all.
In which case,
maybe then Carney T can come back.
Come in and
get some people.
Crack some skulls. Munch up some of these fools looking to cheat on their Viziers here. But no, look, the blue decks have come ready to rumble against the 7/6, and so it hasn't been his day in the sun, but of course got plenty more time for him to shine here. Thompson putting the finishing touches on his hand here, but he's under a little bit of pressure, down to 8 with this Rogue Refiner. I mean, he's got to have an answer to it, right?
Yeah, he is actually just holding Essence Extraction in his hand here. Look,
so it is going to be disallow on the second one.
He's going to disallow the second one here, and he has the option to Essence Extraction, but he's just going to use the Search for Escanta again to try to find more answers, because...
Oh, that sucks.
Oh, he actually whiffed?
He whiffed.
Yeah.
He whiffed. But nonetheless, his hand is still looking okay with Essence Extraction and a Scarab God, so he can just play out his hand here and put himself further ahead. But I don't know if you want to do that, especially as Teamer Energy is able to, you know, punish those tap-out plays.
Absolutely. However, Seth Manfield doesn't play a card like Confiscation Coup, which is actually a pretty good answer to the Scarab God. So Gerry Thompson could have opted to just play it there and feel pretty good about it, but it looks like he just wants to continue getting ahead with the Search for Escanta here.
Essence Extraction is really nice here because not only does it take care of the Rogue Refiner.
And a pass. Seth is now finally out of gas.
Oh dear.
Gerry Thompson is going to continue. Wait, did he whiff
Is this
again?
a double whiff?
Oh no,
oh jeez, be still my beating heart, my goodness. The duress, of course, and the double sensor as well, but Thompson's going to be happy with that. I think it's going to eat the Harness Lightning here as Thompson continues to clear the way for his Scarab God, but...
So Gerry actually has kind of an interesting decision here. He could opt to duress here just to make sure the coast is clear for the Scarab God, or if he thinks Seth Manfield has nothing, he could have played the Scarab God and had the mana to actually make a creature. As is, he's only on 3 mana, so he won't actually be able to use the Scarab God, but I think this is kind of the safer play, and just make sure that Seth Manfield doesn't actually have something like the Harness Lightning to deal with the Scarab God.
The thing is, yeah, Manfield has to draw a card basically right now that deals with it, and Glory
and there's the
against the Essence Scatter. Jeez. So
Classic had it all.
Thompson just had it all here.
And here we go. Here's a win condition.
This is how it works.
Untapping with the Scarab God and 9 mana on the battlefield.
What went wrong for Manfield here?
Gerry Thompson played turn 2 Search for Escanta.
Is that it?
That's what happened.
Is it as simple as that?
I think that's one of the huge keys to this matchup. And he had all the answers, and once he got the card advantage engine going, it was just too hard for Seth Manfield to overcome all of the counter magic, all the removal, and also the duress, which was really strong here.
That doesn't ping on the radar very high for many people, as we see an extension of the hand from Seth Manfield. Search for Escanta has single-handedly propelled Gerry Thompson and snagged him a W here. And
Card's
again,
broken.
Well, you heard it here first, ladies and gentlemen. Get those Search for Escantas in your blue control decks and you'll be well on your way. More Magic coming away from the Magic the Gathering World Championship. It's been a pleasure to have your company so far. We'll see you back here very, very soon. We've got to go to a break, but stick around. We'll be back from Boston Live before you know it.